The story of Edward VII, Part 1. The Victorians were extremely snobby and very well-to-do people in public. They were repressed beyond belief due to the stigmas of society, but the lives they led in private couldn't have been any different to the selves that they showed to the public. Victorian England was widespread with alcohol, debauchery and scandal. The scandals were their form of entertainment, and so they spread like wildfire. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. As the heir to the throne and Prince of England, the life of Queen Victoria's infamous son, King Edward VII, was top of the public's entertainment, and he gave them plenty to talk about. His bedroom antics was one of the most talked about gossip for centuries, and his mother was completely embarrassed by him. He was nicknamed Dirty Bertie by the public and knew how to be a royal with style. As well as his public nickname, his family also had a cute one for him. The future King Edward VII was born on the 9th of November 1841 in Buckingham Palace. His parents called him Albert Edward, but they also nicknamed him Bertie. Bertie was the second eldest child, but due to being born a boy, he was the heir to the throne of England from the moment he was born. His parents laid down the law, but they couldn't contain him no matter what they tried. Queen Victoria and her husband Prince Albert wanted to educate their son so that he would become the best king that he could. Albert in particular took a special interest in young Edward's education, as he did with all of his children, but this would lead to the first of many disappointments for his parents, because he was not interested in his studies at all. Some of his other siblings excelled in their studies, but Edward was not one of them, despite his desire to impress his parents. His tutors were impressed with his charm, however, despite his abilities and educations being lacking. His charm would be something he actually used throughout his life, unlike his studies. His parents were not keen on his ability to charm. They were just interested in his ability to be a good heir, which only led to their disappointment. He was a crowd pleaser, and at 19 years old, and wherever he visited the public, showed up in their thousands to greet him. He took an official tour of North America as the Prince of Wales, where he laid the cornerstone of Canada's Parliament Hill. He then watched a tightrope walk across Niagara Falls, and he stayed with President James Buchanan in the White House. Edward was used to being surrounded by his overbearing parents and siblings who were also under the thumb, but this trip truly opened him up to a new way of life, and he enjoyed it. Edward returned from his diplomatic trip with a completely new mindset. Edward had become withdrawn and reserved, perhaps due to the pressure to perform and constant failure in his parents' eyes. However, this trip to North America opened up his eyes, and he gained a lot of confidence in himself. He returned from his trip a confident man with charisma. With this newfound confidence, it pushed him into his next venture and greatest love, and that was women. He was at an age now where it was expected for him to marry. His parents sent him to Germany in 1861, in the guise that he would be watching military maneuvers. His parents had an obvious ulterior motive. They were keen on their nearly 20-year-old son finding a wife. When Edward arrived in Germany, he met the girl his parents were keen for him to marry, further proving this trip was for matchmaking and nothing more. Princess Alexandra of Denmark, or Alex, was the family's choice for him, and luckily the two of them hit it off. It didn't take long for the families to arrange their marriage, but there was just one problem. Bertie was already romancing other ladies. Poor Alex had no idea she was about to marry a serial womanizer. Not long before travelling to Germany, Edward had been away to Ireland so that he could gain some army experience. He was expected to stay in the barracks with other men to get the full experience, but this came with the camaraderie of his colleagues when they encouraged him to meet the ladies. This is where Edward met the actress Nellie Clifton, who would become the first lady in a long, long line of mistresses. Nellie had stolen the heir's heart. The pair already knew each other from a party that they both attended in England, and she happened to be staying in Ireland at the same time as him, while Edward was out of his parents' prying eyes. They say you join the army a boy and you leave a man. Well, that was certainly the case for Edward, but probably not for the reason most people would think. Edward's fellow cadets in Ireland were encouraging of the prince's rebellious encounters, and they even allowed the actress to hide in their barracks for 3 days while she and Edward had their fun. It was during these 3 days that Edward lost his virginity, not long before he met Princess Alexandra, and it seems he got a thing for it. The young prince was only 19 years old, and he was just starting to live his life to the full, much to the distress of his parents. The Victorians loved a bit of gossip, especially if it involved one of the royals, and his affair became common knowledge to his parents, who were absolutely horrified. Particularly his father, who decided to make the trip to Ireland specifically to talk some sense into the boy. Little did they both know this trip would be the beginning of the end. Prince Albert already struggled with ill health most of his life, and he was particularly vulnerable to the elements. During his trip to see his son, the pair took a walk in the rain together, where Albert attempted to chastise his son. But his words fell on deaf ears, and Bertie refused to curb his behaviour. Albert passed away just 2 short weeks after his talk with his son, and the coincidence of the trip and his death sparked a hatred in his mother. Victoria was beside herself with grief, and she wore mourning clothes for the rest of her life. The pain she felt towards her husband's death was reflected on her son through anger. She had always been disappointed in Bertie, and this turn of events only worsened it, because she blamed him for his father's death. Queen Victoria had never been affectionate with Bertie, but this was typically because she believed he was a disaster. When Prince Albert passed, Victoria allegedly absolutely blamed her son. While she once found him embarrassing, she now despised him. She even wrote to her eldest daughter, "I can or shall look at him without a shudder." Edward was already a disappointment to his parents, and now his mother despised him. So he decided, rather than try to be the better person and make amends with my mother, that he would continue to live his life however he pleased. However, he did oblige at getting married, as his father had wished before his death, and he did go on to marry the girl his parents had chosen for him. At the age of 21, he married the 18-year-old Alexandra of Denmark at Windsor Castle on the 10th of March 1863. His wedding vows were more like guidelines than actual rules, and there was no wedding ring on earth that was going to keep Edward tied to just one woman. Even his father's wishes to stop his affair with Nellie did not curb it, as he continued to see her despite his father telling him to break it off. When Edward returned to England, he started his affair right back up again, but it didn't last long, as he had eyes on even more women. Edward was becoming a womanizer, and his wife had to accept that he would never be monogamous. She knew he was sleeping around with mistresses, but she just had to ignore it. if she wished to be his queen consort and wife. It is believed he had at least 55 mistresses, and those are the ones that we know about. It was due to this behaviour that got him the nickname Dirty Bertie, which is not the best name to be associated with the future King of England. Bertie was unfazed by the nickname. He continued to womanize his way through society with his 55 mistresses, as well as the prostitutes he saw in Paris brothels also. Yet for all his debauchery, Edward was remarkably discreet, and more often than not, the society gossips could only guess at who was sharing the prince's bed on a given night. But the thing about affairs is, if you have enough of them, you start to leave behind a pretty obvious evidence. Edward had countless affairs, and he never acknowledged a single illegitimate child. He was either the most careful man alive, or he was lying about the consequences of his behaviour. Join me in part 2 to look into whether Edward had any illegitimate children that he refused to acknowledge. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.